Hi kids, do you like violence? Hey everybody, welcome back. Welcome back to the channel of a homeless failed artist, a homeless piece of human garbage, etc., etc. Um, Welcome back, guys. Today, I am recording in a new location. Yet again, just chilling out over here at this little park area, and tried to record this video a couple times. Well, the first time it really wasn't. Um, that coherent. The second time, I decided on a topic that I was going to talk about, a story time with John. Um, and I had the video, but I didn't have the references for basically the news articles yet, which I found those in the Gaston, or the Gaston local news during the time, and the stories are still out there, which I'm going to include in the comment section, a link to the story. First of all, let me just say that the stories and the articles I provide are not the truth, or not at least not what actually happened that day or at that night. But I also want to say too that being a part of this situation, being involved in this situation, and then seeing the reporting and the coverage afterwards uh, is kind of a stark thing. It kind of shows you how the media will skew things and report things and completely ignore the facts or any follow up evidence or anything like that. And I, for one, was never interviewed. I don't know if anybody at my job was ever interviewed at the time. From what I know of, nobody ever spoke of it to the people who were actually staffed in the store or who were working during that time. The reporters or the media never asked to speak to any of us. So, yeah. But that just goes to show you, I guess, how it is. And my story involves, and the title of this video is not clickbait. This is actually a true incident that happened in Gaston County, North Carolina, on a food line on Garrison Road, Garrison Boulevard. And it's basically the time I was almost lynched with an immigrant. And what better time to speak about immigration and immigrants and immigrant stuff than right now, especially with, what's going on at the moment in the country, the bullshit that's happening and the stupid shit that's happening with the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, and ICE and all that stuff. So, anyways, our story takes place in 2020, still during the pandemic. Um, and this was when I was working at the food line on Garrison Boulevard in Gastonia, North Carolina, and the dairy department. And I was a dairy department associate there for, a span of maybe 2, 3 months, 4 months. And I just started with Food Line as a company at the beginning of the pandemic in Mount Holly. And while working for them during the pandemic, that's when my former friend, who shall not be named, decided to kick me out of his home and make me homeless during the pandemic. He's a Trump supporter, gun-toting, fucking sidearm carrying, don't want socialism, and hated Barack Obama and was a big Alex Jones fan, et cetera, et cetera. So anywho, so I'm in the Salvation Army at the time, and I'm staying at the Salvation Army and have a job, and it's a homeless shelter, and dealing with all that bullshit and dealing with the fact that I couldn't find a place to rent. This is toward the end of my 4 months there at this particular food line. And this incident was, one of the things that kind of just, amongst everything else that had happened in the last 5 months of my life, was just something that kind of drove me over the edge and added to mental depressions and, hatred of, what had happened, the American system, the American society that I was thrust into during the pandemic, the bullshit that I saw, how people were acting, et cetera, et cetera. And this really didn't help with anything. Basically, I'm working this job. I don't have any place to I can't find a place to rent. There's no availabilities in Gaston County because the moratorium on evictions and stuff is still going. And I'm working this job, and I was never really truly completely trained in the dairy department. But we kind of whittled by, and it just could have been a lot better knowing what I knew later on about it or whatever. And I had somebody who offered me a place to rent, but they lived in basically squalor, and but regardless, that was what a contributing factor to some of my madness and just losing my mind during this whole time. And this story is one of those things. So back in 2020, the article I'll reference about the woman who's in this fucking story goes back to 2020. So essentially what happened was my shifts started at that food line from 11 to 7, 11 in the morning to 7 at night. And basically, I ran the dairy department. So when you entered the store, the dairy department was all the way over here on the left-hand side. In front of my department, or on that last aisle there, was the ice cream area. And then along the back of the store, that's where the dairy department kind of, went. And then along the back wall was the meat department. I don't know if you've ever been in a food line in the South, or you're from the South and you've been in food lines, but basically it's a standard kind of layout. This store was converted from an older supermarket, so it was very small. It was actually, incredibly small compared to the one in Mount Holly. So the layout, especially the back room, was very, very tiny. And there really wasn't a place to put freight in the back room. It was just basically one aisle and then a small little area to store grocery pallets and stuff like that. I mean, it was nothing like, it should have been updated and stuff like that, but it was nothing like the Mount Holly store that I came from. But anyways, that being said, so I was working one day, and all of a sudden we got a call over the intercom, our code for a missing child alert, basically an Amber Alert, which means a child has either been abducted or is missing. And basically Walmart has a similar situation with their employees, and I assume every other retail store kind of has this, but it's basically coded talk to not alert any perpetrators and to let the staff know that this is what's happening. So this was getting around maybe 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon, when all of a sudden, this code was called. And I was in the back room at the time, and I heard the code called, and I decided to cut through, I think I cut through the meat department to get back out to the sales floor immediately. So I come out of the meat department into the back aisle, and immediately, all the other associates are starting to mobilize and go immediately look. And the gentleman who worked in the meat department at the time, he was actually back in his refrigerator unit, which you couldn't hear the intercom back there, but he popped out, and he said, what was the code that was called? And I told him, I was like, we have the code for, a missing child. And he essentially was like, oh shit. And he snaps to it, and we all start searching aisles. And I'm like, I'm going back toward the dairy department, which was straight ahead in that back aisle. I'm going back to the dairy department, and I'm going to scan there real quick. So I walk down to the dairy department, I take a left, and as I'm heading down the aisle, I notice there's a couple people in the aisle, because I'm in scan mode, I'm in hunt mode, looking for this kid. And to my left is a shorter Mexican gentleman who's standing at the cooler, and I notice he is just standing there staring into the ice cream section. And to my right, I noticed there was a pregnant woman, a pregnant white woman, pushing a buggy full of merchandise and stuff coming up the aisle, right? So, I don't pay any mind to it really, but I do notice when I'm walking down the aisle that the gentleman who's standing there, the Mexican gentleman, seems to be staring off into space and wobbling a little bit, kind of like the drunk wobble. I don't know if you've seen a lot of drunks or alcoholics, whatever, or people who have been drinking and are drunk. But it's hard for him to stand still. So he's having a little drunk wobble. And I'm like, okay, I noticed that, and I proceed down the aisle because I'm still looking for this kid. I'm in, fucking basically all alert mode, and we need to locate this kid. So as I'm going down the aisle, I pass him and I get toward the front of the store and the front of our deli department, which that's basically where the dairy section came out at toward the front, was at the deli department. So as I'm going down, right when I get toward the front of the aisle, toward the front of the store, the code is all of a sudden called off. It's canceled. And I'm kind of like, okay, what the fuck? Because this ain't exactly something you hear all the time. This is, and during the beginning of the pandemic, and when I was working in Mount Holly, that store was packed all day, every day. It was a fucking madhouse. Every day, all day. People panic shopping, just crazy shit. And, during that entire time, we never once, with all those thousands and thousands of people packing that store, bringing their kids in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and all the people just everywhere, panic shopping, never had that code called. And now in this store, and I've worked in retail throughout my life, various levels of retail and different organizations like Walmarts and stuff like that for over 15 years at this point. And I had never once been involved in one of these calls. Never once. Never once heard it. Never once had it happen. And especially in Walmart, that's very surprising because you figure that'd be the one place where children would be abducted and go missing on a regular basis. But it never happened. And all of a sudden this code is called off. So I'm like, what the fuck? What the fuck is going on? So, and I know the manager who was on duty, and she would not call this code unless there was absolutely a reason to call this code, or she was given a reason to call this code. So I'm like, all right, well, thank goodness, I guess either way, the kid's been recovered and whatever. And to put it another way about this code, it's kind of like a bomb threat. It's kind of almost like, somebody calling a code for like a bomb in the building or something. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's the kind of level of panic it sets off. So anyways, so I'm down at the front of the aisle, and I turn around, and all of a sudden I notice the pregnant woman has followed me down. And as soon as I turn around, she's there, and I look at her, and she's like, tears are welling up in her eye. And she's feeling like, she's looking like panicked, and I'm like, yes, ma'am, how can I help you? And she tells me, she's like, the Mexican guy who was standing over there was following her up and down the aisle and making her feel uncomfortable. So I'm like, oh God, here we go. And if you ever worked in the service industry, retail industry, anything like that, anybody can tell you who's worked in those fields. Usually when it rains, it pours, which means usually when something goes wrong, there's multiple things that go wrong. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, well, we just had this fucking kid. Somebody just tried to abduct this kid. Now I haven't been up front yet. So for all I know, they caught the guy while he was trying to walk out of the building with this child. They got him pinned down up front and they called the code off, for all I know. And, but now I'm dealing with this. So the woman's like very distraught. She's very pregnant. She is ready to pop. She is very far along in her pregnancy. You can tell. And, she's telling me about this guy over here. So I already know by what I saw when I walked down that this guy's drunk, obviously. Drunk enough to where he can't stand still without wobbling around. And so I'm like, here we go. So not even going up front and not even seeing what was going on there really, I take the woman and I lead her over to the deli department. Now, from the deli department in this store, you could see the front of the store and the customer service desk and stuff like that. Now, I can't remember any kind of like commotion or anything going on. So I really, there's so many things hitting my mind at once at this point. I'm kind of really not hearing anything or recalling hearing anything going on over there as of yet. So, which is kind of odd considering what just happened. So I tell the woman, I'm like, okay, well, just follow me over here. So I lead her over to the front of the deli department, and I call for one of the women who work in the deli department over. And I'm like, do you got a chair back here, or can you walk around the corner here and grab me one of those chairs, or can you stand with her while I go grab a chair and I'll bring it back over? I grab one of the chairs from the customer service desk real quick and run back over there. Once again, still not noticing any kind of commotion or problems going on. And I walk it back over there to the woman, and I tell her just to sit down right here, and just stay right here, And I also tell the deli woman, or the woman who's working in the deli associate. I tell her, I'm like, go and get the manager on duty and tell her to call the police like right now, because at this point I know that the gentleman in the aisle, the Mexican gentleman, is drunk. And at this point, I know, after talking to the pregnant woman for a second, I was like, well, are you here with your husband? Do you have a husband, boyfriend, whatever? And she's like, yeah, he's over there picking up something else. So already I know that I have a gentleman who is in the aisle who is obviously drunk, a Mexican gentleman. And I already know that this woman's husband or boyfriend, whoever he might be, is over here in the store somewhere, and it's only a matter of time before he comes back to his distraught, very pregnant wife and finds out what happens, and then he might decide to escalate this situation very quickly. And the gentleman who is intoxicated over in the aisle might decide, well, that's a great idea since I'm 10 sheets into the wind, so why not escalate this shit to the max? Not even knowing really what this guy is capable of, who this immigrant guy is or whatever, but all I know is for a fact that he was following this pregnant woman up and down the aisle and making her feel very uncomfortable. So I get her settled and everything like that, and then I proceed to walk back over to the Mexican dude who's drunk. And it's only me and him in the aisle at this point. So I walk over to him, and I kind of put my hand on his shoulder, like, not aggressively, but I kind of put my hand on his shoulder. I'm like, hey, hey man, you all right? Because he's just kind of staring into, kind of drunk and staring into the ice cream or whatever. And I'll never forget, the guy just turns to me and he starts to cry. Like he starts to weep, and like he's just crying. And I'm like, oh fuck, what's going on here? And this is just in quick succession. This up to this point, it's not even been like 5-10 minutes. This whole situation right now. So, anyways, obviously he's distraught. He's upset. He's drunk, because when I got up on him, I could smell the alcohol. You could smell the liquor, straight liquor. And I told him, I'm like, hey man, let's take a walk. So I start to walk him back up the aisle toward the back of the store, because I'm trying to put some distance between him and the pregnant woman, and maybe we could walk for a second. I could talk to him, and I could kind of figure out what exactly is going on here. Now at this point, I have to tell you that I have no idea, or I have no clue that this gentleman is connected to the missing child thing. So at this point, he's just a whole other situation that has just coincidentally popped off while this missing child alert popped off, right? So we're walking back up the back of the aisle, and we turn the corner, and I'm just kind of walking with him, talking with him, or I'm just like, kind of walk with me for a second. He doesn't really speak English. He doesn't really have good English. So we get to the back of the store, and as soon as we turn the corner, we get to the back part there, turn the corner, and I can't exactly remember what hit me first, But the first thing that kind of hit me was the sound of like somebody saying something like, let's find him or whatever. And the sound of like a bunch of feet coming at me very quickly. And before I even had time to register this, there was maybe 10 to 15 people surrounding me and this gentleman. And led by this white woman, her 2 daughters, and her husband, a white guy. Both of her little girls are white. They're maybe 8 years old, 9 years old, something like that. And very young girls. And they were going off the fucking chain. They were here to kill this man. All of them. All of them were here to basically lynch and kill this man. Now, I turn the corner. I have him beside me to the left. And next thing you know, coming out of the 2 aisles over is like 15, 20 fucking people. And they all spill into this back aisle. And I'm standing there, and immediately they surround, basically, but they don't surround us, but they basically form a wall in front of us. And I'm like, whoa, wait, yeah, what the fuck's going on? And she's screaming, that's him, that's that motherfucker, whatever. And she just goes into a tirade. She's like, oh, I'll take my fucking gun out and blow your goddamn brains out, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And you know, of course, people are there with their phones videotaping and trying to videotape this. And there's video of this that exists. I don't know if I'm in the video, but I know for the most part what my part in all this was. And this is my truth. And this will kind of be in comparison to the article you may read where the truth is obviously just what the fuck she said happened, which wasn't the truth. And because he was an immigrant and they labeled him as an illegal immigrant, they never even bothered to follow up with they used that as the propaganda they needed to be like, this illegal immigrant's trying to rape and steal white babies, which as far as I know of did not happen. Okay. But anyways, they're there, they got a lynch mob. And I essentially had to tell these people, I'm like, look, you know, when she said about shooting him, I was like, well, you know, you're not going to fucking do that. And I'm like, you're going to have to shoot me first, basically. Because I'm like, I'm not going to let you shoot this guy. And then it turned into, she said something like, oh, they're defending a pedophile, whatever. They're trying to protect the goddamn pedophile. And I'm like, I don't know who the fuck is what, but I'm not trying to defend a pedophile. I'm trying to keep somebody from fucking getting lynched. You know, like, who the fuck is to say whatever the fuck you're saying right now is true? Because as far as I know of, the guy I just saw is sitting there crying his eyes out, and he's obviously intoxicated. So, you know, something's not, I don't know. So, I mean, either way, though, it's just one guy against 20 fucking people. And in the crowd, mind you, was black people. And they were egging this shit on too. And I kind of find that funny. I'm like, dude, like, you're people of color, and you're sitting here trying to lynch this man when don't you see that this was the same situation, you know, 40 years ago, 50, 60 years ago in the South with a black person on the other end of this shit, and you're participating in this? Like, well, what kind of pieces of shit are you? I mean, that's the truth. And they were, you know, one of them was one of their people holding their phone because they had to get a video for Instagram of somebody getting murdered so they could get their views up and shit like that. Didn't matter that this was a situation that a white woman was telling them to do, and basically this is what happened, and they were following this white woman's lead to go lynch a fellow minority. And basically I told them, I'm like, look, people, if you can do whatever the fuck you want to, but the police are on their way right now. Like, the police have already been called. Like, you know, like, so if you're going to do something. And when the guy reached into his pocket, he pulled out his phone, and he had money in his hand and a phone, and then some asshole in the crowd, some older white guy, was like, look, he's reaching in his pocket, and slapped the dude's hand, slapped his phone out of his hand, his money on the ground. And I immediately scooped that shit up, held on to it, and then gave that back to him when we took him to the back room, because eventually that's what we had to do. We had to move him to the back room to separate him from these fucking animals and get him set down until the police could get there. So I'm kind of, the video exists out there somewhere, I'm sure. My actions, I know what I did that day. I stand by my actions. I didn't, if they caught that on the video, fine. A couple of years later, whenever I was talking to somebody about it, they pretended like they didn't even remember I was the one standing right beside the motherfucker. And I'm like, yeah, I was standing there with a couple of other associates who were basically holding this goddamn line of these people who, and bearing in mind, we had all been through, all of the associates in this store had been through this pandemic shit. So at this point, we were really kind of fucking tired of the public being like, we're going to go in and act like goddamn idiots inside of a fucking store, and that's going to be perfectly acceptable for civilization, which was happening all over the country. There might have been a video you seen online where it was this black gentleman who was working at a food line, and one of the fucking customers was tried to cut him, and he beat that man within an inch of his life. The fucking dude who cut him, because at that point people were just fucking like grocery store workers, retail workers were just fucking fed up with the shit, man. Because bearing in mind, during the pandemic, we did not get laid off. We did not get compensation. We did not get sick pay. We did not get, COVID pay, that was worth a goddamn thing. Most associates in most jobs, as far as I'm concerned, got a minimal 50-cent raise for the bullshit they had to deal with on a daily basis. I don't even know if $2, $3 raises would have been worth it at that point. And which companies rolled back, by the way, when the pandemic was over. Companies took away that pay and took away anything they offered associates during that time. But regardless, grocery store people could not leave. They could not leave, and they had to deal with people who were potentially infected day in, day out. And we just couldn't get supplies. We couldn't get supply lines. It was just all enough to make people break. And this situation in and of itself made me break, because for the first time, I got to see just how goddamn ignorant and stupid and ridiculous and fucking frothing at the mouth ridiculous people could fucking be toward one another. Especially when there was no viable proof, no nothing. Her two daughters were right there beside her, standing beside her in the aisle, and the guy who supposedly tried, in a news article, it says her story was he tried to abduct them, which how's that possible when he was standing over on the last aisle looking at this pregnant woman? So come to find out, to sum this all up, the real story of the matter is, what happened that I did not know is the gentleman was walking around asking, I guess, and this was the first couple he came across, and he asked them to take a picture, to let them use his phone to take a picture of him with their daughters. And before you jump the gun and say, oh, that's some kind of sexual pervert thing, no, actually, from what he was saying, and his story is that on that day his daughter was murdered, and I guess it just got to be too much for him, and he wanted to, in his mind, in his drunk mind, or his twisted mind, or his hurt mind, or whatever was going on, he wanted to find some kind of supplicant for his daughter to take a picture with, to remember something of her. And he paid the woman, and the woman got payment and let him take a picture with her daughters. Now, when the child abduction code was called, she called that because her daughters decided to go to the bathroom or run off real quick and not tell their mother, and then the mother panicked, and then she immediately found them. So if the guy tried to abduct them, what was he doing over on the last aisle by himself? And he was an illegal immigrant. They did deport him back to wherever, or he was an undocumented immigrant, or I don't even know. That was just kind of what came out of it. But I'll provide the links to that. That's kind of the end of the story. This video is getting too long. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you have any negative or positive comments below, please leave them. And thank you guys so much for watching. And also, if you'd like to give anything to the cause, my donation links or my links to my financial stuff is down in the description. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching. Y'all have a good one.